families of the 14 patients who died, distraught after that not guilty verdict. But the attorney representing those 14 families says the case against Dr. Husel is not over. The next step being civil trials against him, a deposition already scheduled for early next month. This case set off a huge debate about end-of-life medical care and the use of opioids. Let's talk now about how this impacts future cases. So here with us today is Felecia Nance. She is a criminal defense attorney. Welcome. Thanks for being here. What is the bottom line to be drawn from this trial and this acquittal?
Well, the bottom line is that before the prosecution or any prosecution brings a case, they need to make sure that they have enough evidence to support their case. In this instance, Mount Carmel did not have the evidence, and that's what the jury found, that he did not intend to purposely cause the death of these individuals, these patients, nor did he, the dosage, which was at issue, the fentanyl, whether that dosage was enough, because there's nothing that's been established in the Mount Carmel policy to say that a certain amount of fentanyl is prohibited or is allowed. So I think that the prosecution had an uphill battle and didn't obviously make their burden, and the jury came back with a finding of not guilty.
And you know, the attorney said here that intent was a key, and a big difference between civil trials and criminal trials is that the burden is not as high for civil trials. What do you anticipate in civil court coming forward?
Well, there are several of the families, I don't know if it's all 14, but many of them have filed suit, and they're supposed to bring the cases to trial, I believe, this summer. So that is a different standard by the preponderance of the evidence. But I think the fact that we had the testimony and we were able to hear from 54 witnesses in this criminal case, I think that will impact whether or not the cases in civil court will prevail or not. But it is a lower standard, and maybe there'll be some settlement, as there has been a settlement with the Mount Carmel hospital as well.
And a big difference I saw here in this case, as opposed to other ones that have been brought against by states against pharmacies, et cetera, is that this was an end-of-life care situation. These were not young kids overdosing on medications that they never should have been prescribed. Does that matter in this case?
Absolutely. And Jose Baez addressed that after the verdict came back today and indicated just because there is a crisis in this country and throughout the world with fentanyl overdoses, that's in the streets, and it shouldn't be brought into the hospital where these patients are being treated by medical personnel. So he did emphasize that fact and said that those are two completely different issues, and the fentanyl problems on the street should not have been brought into this hospital scenario. And hopefully, he said that it'll send a message to the hospitals and to care providers that they can provide the care needed for these terminally ill patients.
And what kind of precedent does this case set, given the differences between this case and others that we just mentioned? Mr. Baez saying, quote, "This verdict speaks not only to William, but to all of those doctors and nurses out there who are attempting their best to give comfort care in a difficult situation. They don't need to be looking over their shoulders, wondering if they're ever going to get charged with a crime." Will prosecutors be more reluctant to bring cases against doctors for their alleged role in the opioid epidemic?
Well, I believe that Mr. Baez was very clear in that there has to be a distinction between the overdoses in the street and then what doctors are administering to patients that are terminally ill. And in this case, all these patients were terminally ill or needed critical care. And so I think that before another prosecutor brings a case, that needs to be examined to make sure that all their I's are dotted, T's are crossed in making sure that that particular hospital does have a policy with regard to the amount of dosage for not only fentanyl, but other drugs that are administered for pain. But also the physicians need to be given some discretion in terms of the care for their patients as well.
And what about the black market, the role of social media in these other cases that we've been talking about, these big multi-billion-dollar cases?
Well, I think that they need to be examined on a case-by-case basis, because we have a situation when we're talking about the administration in the hospital is different than people being administered medications that they can take home for their own use. So I think the regulation is a different issue and needs to be examined on a case-by-case basis, because that is different. When you're in the hospital, it's being administered very closely, whereas when people are given medication, they could also provide it to friends and family members and or sell it on the black market, which has happened. So I think that they are two different things and should be handled differently.
All right, Karen, thank you for breaking it down for us and the implications. We appreciate it.
Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.